Moscow, the Kremlin, 3:47 a.m. local time. Inside a secure bunker beneath the oldest walls of Russian power, President Vladimir Putin sits at the head of a long table. Around him, the defense minister, the chief of the general staff, the director of the FSB, and the commanders of Russia's strategic forces. The air is thick. No one speaks. On the screens, satellite feeds, NATO convoys moving through Poland, American B-2 bombers repositioning to bases in the United Kingdom, Finnish F-35s patrolling near the border, a Swedish submarine surfacing in the Baltic. Putin's hand rests on a red folder marked Directive 4789 Crimson. He looks at his generals. Initiate. Within seconds, deep beneath the Ural Mountains, technicians at a classified cyber warfare facility begin typing. Lines of code stream across monitors. Across the Atlantic, in Virginia, Maryland, Texas, and California, the first tremors begin. This is not a drill. This is not a mistake. This is the first hour of World War III. What you're about to witness is a scenario, a rigorously researched, militarily plausible simulation of what could happen if the United States and the Russian Federation went to war today. Not in 2014, not in some distant future. Today, we will move hour by hour through the first 12 hours, day by day through the first week by week through the first month, and month by month through the aftermath. This is not speculation. This is strategy. This is geography. This is math. And the answer to the question, who loses, may surprise you. Let's begin. Hour 0, 3:47 a.m. Moscow, 7:47 p.m. EST previous day. The attack begins invisibly. Russian cyber units, operating under the GRU's main intelligence directorate and the FSB's Center for Information Security, launch coordinated distributed denial-of-service attacks against 73 critical U.S. infrastructure nodes. Targets include the Eastern Interconnection Power Grid, GPS satellite ground stations, the New York Stock Exchange data centers, Federal Reserve wire transfer systems, and air traffic control hubs in Atlanta, Chicago, and Dallas. This is not hacking for espionage. This is cyber warfare as a prelude to kinetic warfare. Within 9 minutes, rolling blackouts begin across parts of Virginia and North Carolina. GPS signals degrade by 40% in the Midwest. The FAA grounds 1,200 flights. At U.S. Cyber Command headquarters in Fort Meade, Maryland, alarms scream. General Sarah Castellano, commanding officer, is woken at home. She's on the phone with the National Security Advisor in under 3 minutes. We're under attack. Hour 1. 4:47 a.m. Moscow, 8:47 p.m. EST. The White House Situation Room fills. President of the United States enters. CIA Director, Secretary of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, NSA Director. On the main screen, a live map of the attacks. Red dots bloom across the continental U.S. like a rash. The president asks one question. Is this Russia? NSA confirms. Digital signatures match known GRU malware. The attack originated from servers in Siberia, Kaliningrad, and St. Petersburg. The president orders immediate retaliation. U.S. Cyber Command deploys Nitro Zeus, a classified offensive cyber weapon designed to cripple Russian command and control networks. Within minutes, Russian air defense radar systems along the Kaliningrad border experience cascading failures. Power substations in Murmansk go dark. The Moscow Metro's digital signaling system crashes. But this is only the beginning. Because at the same moment, in the Russian Ministry of Defense, a red light blinks on a console. The Americans have responded. And now, the next domino falls. Hour 2. 5:47 a.m. Moscow, 9:47 p.m. EST. In a hardened bunker beneath the Ural Mountains, Russian strategic rocket forces receive the order. Move to Readiness Level 2. This means road-mobile Yars intercontinental ballistic missile launchers disperse into forests across Siberia. Submarine-based Bulava missiles are readied aboard Boret-class submarines in the Barents Sea, and avant-garde hypersonic glide vehicles are prepped at launch sites near Dombarovsky. Russia's nuclear triad, land, sea, air, begins to wake. Simultaneously, U.S. Space Force detects the movement. Infrared satellites track heat blooms. Synthetic aperture radar identifies mobile launchers leaving garrison. The message flashes to NORAD, to U.S. Strategic Command in Omaha, to the Pentagon. The president is briefed. They're mobilizing their strategic forces. The decision is instant. Match them. At Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, Minuteman III missile crews descend into silos. At Kings Bay, Georgia, Ohio-class submarines slip moorings and head for deep water. B-2 Spirit bombers at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri are loaded with AGM-86 cruise missiles. The United States nuclear triad mirrors Russia's movements. The world is now minutes from the unthinkable. Hour 3. 6:47 a.m. Moscow, 10:47 p.m. EST. NATO activates Article 4, consultations among member states in response to a threat. Within the hour, it will escalate to Article 5, collective defense. At NATO headquarters in Brussels, the Secretary-General convenes an emergency session. On secure video links, the leaders of 32 nations, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they all report the same thing. Russian forces are moving. The 11th Army Corps in Kaliningrad begins repositioning. Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile systems move toward the Polish border. Russian fighter jets, Su-35s and Su-57s, scramble from air bases near Murmansk and St. Petersburg. The Baltic Fleet sorties from Baltiysk. The Northern Fleet leaves Severomorsk. Submarines, Yasen-class attack subs, Oscar II-class cruise missile subs, dive beneath the Arctic ice. In response, NATO forces mobilize. The U.S. 2nd Cavalry Regiment in Germany moves east. Polish Leopard 2 tanks deploy toward the Suwałki Gap. British Typhoon jets scramble from RAF Lossiemouth. The U.S. Navy's Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group, currently in the eastern Mediterranean, turns north. And in the Norwegian Sea, American attack submarines, Virginia-class boats, go silent. Hunting. Hour 4. 7:47 a.m. Moscow, 11:47 p.m. EST. The first shots are not fired by soldiers, they are fired by missiles. At 7:51 a.m. Moscow time, a Russian Kaliber cruise missile streaks from a launch platform in the Black Sea. Its target, a NATO radar installation in Romania. Flight time, 11 minutes. At 8:02 a.m., the radar station ceases to exist. Simultaneously, Russian Kinzhal hypersonic missiles, launched from MiG-31K interceptors over the Caspian Sea, arc toward U.S. Aegis Ashore missile defense sites in Poland and Romania. These missiles travel at Mach 10. There is no interception. Both sites are destroyed. NATO's missile shield in Eastern Europe is blinded. In Washington, the response is immediate. The president authorizes strikes. At Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, B-52 bombers take off. Their payloads, AGM-158 JAS-SM stealth cruise missiles. Targets, Russian air defense nodes, command centers, and missile launch sites. From U.S. Navy destroyers in the Norwegian Sea, Tomahawk cruise missiles launch toward Russian Northern Fleet bases at Severomorsk and Gadjievo. The first American munitions are in the air. The war has gone kinetic. Hour 5. 8:47 a.m. Moscow, 12:47 a.m. EST. Across Russia, air raid sirens wail. In Moscow, citizens flood into metro stations, repurposed as nuclear shelters. In St. Petersburg, families huddle in basements. The Russian government broadcasts on all channels. The motherland is under attack. Stay calm. Follow civil defense protocols. In the United States, confusion reigns. The cyber attacks have caused chaos. Power is still out in parts of the East Coast. GPS is unreliable. Internet traffic is crippled. But slowly, the message spreads. We are at war with Russia. At military bases across the U.S., reserve units are activated. The National Guard mobilizes. The Selective Service System, dormant since the 1970s, goes online. In Europe, the situation is dire. Russian ground forces have not yet crossed any borders, but the missile strikes have begun. Estonian air defenses engage Russian cruise missiles over Tallinn. Several are intercepted. 3 get through. A barracks housing NATO troops is hit. 17 American soldiers are killed. 31 wounded. The first American blood is spilled. Hour 6. 9:47 a.m. Moscow, 1:47 a.m. EST. Deep beneath the Arctic Ocean, a Russian Yasen-class submarine, the Kazan, tracks an American Virginia-class submarine, the USS Colorado. Both boats are running silent. Both are hunting. At 9:52 a.m. Moscow time, the Kazan launches 2 Caliber anti-ship missiles at a NATO surface group 200 miles to the west. The USS Colorado detects the launch. The American captain makes a decision. He fires. 2 Mark 48 torpedoes scream through the water. The Kazan deploys countermeasures, decoys, noisemakers, but 1 torpedo finds its mark. The Russian submarine is crippled, its surfaces listing. Russian rescue ships race to the scene, but the Colorado is not done. Minutes later, it fires a salvo of Tomahawk missiles toward Russian submarine pens at Gadjevo. The missiles strike fuel depots and command buildings. Fires rage. Undersea warfare has begun. Hour 7. 10:47 a.m. Moscow, 2:47 a.m. EST. In Kaliningrad, Russian Bastion coastal defense missile systems target NATO ships in the Baltic Sea. A Polish frigate, the General Kazimierz Puławski, is struck. It does not sink, but it is dead in the water. German and Danish warships return fire, launching Harpoon anti-ship missiles toward Russian positions. The Baltic becomes a kill zone. Meanwhile, in the skies over the Arctic, the air war escalates. Russian Su-57 stealth fighters engage American F-22 Raptors over the Norwegian Sea. This is the first peer-level air combat in history. Both jets are nearly invisible to radar. Both carry long-range missiles. At 10:53 a.m. Moscow time, a Russian pilot locks onto an American F-22. He fires an R-37M missile, range 400 kilometers. The American pilot evades, barely. He returns fire with an AEM-120D. The Russian jet explodes, but seconds later another American F-22 is hit by a second Russian missile. The pilot ejects over the frigid sea. He is the first American pilot shot down in air-to-air combat since 1999. Hour 8. 11:47 a.m. Moscow, 3:47 a.m. EST. At NATO headquarters, the decision is made. Article 5 is formally invoked. An attack on one is an attack on all. Every NATO member is now at war with Russia. Within minutes, orders are transmitted. British Astute-class submarines are authorized to engage Russian naval assets. French Rafale fighters scramble from bases in the Baltic states. German Leopard 2 tanks move toward the Polish-Belarus border. Turkish forces close the Bosporus Strait, trapping Russian Black Sea Fleet assets. The United States orders full mobilization. Every available carrier strike group begins moving toward Europe. The USS Gerald R. Ford, USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, and USS George H.W. Bush all turn toward the Atlantic. Strategic bombers, B-1s, B-2s, B-52s, are dispersed to bases in Guam, Diego Garcia, and the UK. The United States Pacific Fleet is ordered to monitor Russian activity in the Far East and to deter any Chinese intervention. This is now a global war. Hour 9, 12:47 p.m. Moscow, 4:47 a.m. EST. In the Kremlin, Putin meets with his Security Council. The question on the table: do we escalate to tactical nuclear weapons? The Russian military doctrine allows for the use of low-yield nuclear weapons in response to a conventional threat to the state's existence. But Russia is not yet losing. The decision: hold. But the threat remains, and the United States knows it. At U.S. Strategic Command, Looking Glass, the airborne command post, takes to the skies. An E-6B Mercury aircraft, capable of launching nuclear weapons if ground command is destroyed, orbits over the central United States. The Doomsday plane is in the air. Hour 10. 1:47 p.m. Moscow, 5:47 a.m. EST. The economic consequences begin to unfold. Global stock markets crash. The Dow Jones plummets 4,000 points before trading is halted. European exchanges collapse. The ruble disintegrates. Oil prices spike to $180 per barrel. Natural gas prices in Europe quintuple. Panic buying strips grocery stores across the United States and Europe. Banks close. ATMs run dry. The global financial system teeters on the edge of collapse, and the war is only 10 hours old. Hour 11. 2:47 p.m. Moscow, 6:47 a.m. EST. Russian forces in Belarus, the 20th Guards Combined Arms Army, begin moving west toward the Polish border. This is the moment NATO has feared. The Suwałki Gap, a 60-mile stretch of land between Belarus and Kaliningrad, is the only land corridor connecting the Baltic states to the rest of NATO. If Russia seizes it, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are cut off. NATO forces rush to defend. The U.S. 101st Airborne Division, stationed in Romania, begins airlift operations into Poland. Polish and Lithuanian forces dig in. The first ground battle of World War III is about to begin. Hour 12. 3:47 p.m. Moscow, 7:47 a.m. Est. 12 hours in. The war that began with ones and zeros, with cyber attacks and silent code, has become missiles, bombs, and blood. Russia has struck NATO bases. NATO has struck Russian military assets. Submarines hunt in the deep. Fighters duel in the sky. Armies mass on borders. Casualties are in the hundreds. Soon they will be in the thousands. And the world watches, paralyzed, because everyone knows this is only the beginning. Day 1, first 24 hours. By the end of the first day, the scale of destruction is staggering. Russian missile strikes have destroyed NATO air bases in Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states. U.S. Tomahawk strikes have crippled Russian Northern Fleet infrastructure. The Baltic Sea is a graveyard of burning ships. Civilian casualties begin to mount. In Tallinn, Estonia, a Russian cruise missile, intended for a military target, strikes a residential block. 43 civilians are killed. In Kaliningrad, a U.S. JASSM missile hits a fuel depot near a hospital. The explosion kills 19. Neither side intended to kill civilians, but in modern war, precision is a myth. Cyber warfare intensifies. Russian hackers penetrate U.S. electrical grid control systems. Rolling blackouts affect 30 million Americans. The Federal Reserve's payment systems are offline for 6 hours. In retaliation, U.S. Cyber Command attacks Russian railway signaling systems. Troop transport trains derail in Siberia. Logistics collapse. The first refugee columns begin. Families in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania flee westward. By nightfall, 200,000 people are on the move. By the end of day 1, 14. NATO aircraft destroyed. 9 Russian aircraft destroyed. 3 NATO ships sunk. 2 Russian ships sunk. 1 Russian submarine sunk. Estimated military casualties, 400 plus. Estimated civilian casualties, 150 plus. Day 2. The ground war begins. At dawn, Russian forces cross into Estonia from the east. The assault is led by the 6th Combined Arms Army, tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, and attack helicopters. Estonian forces, outnumbered 10-1, fall back toward Tallinn, but they are not alone. NATO's enhanced forward presence battle groups, British, French, and American troops, engage the Russians near Narva. The first tank battle of the 21st century erupts. British Challenger 3 tanks face Russian T-90M and T-14 Armata tanks. The battle is brutal. Both sides suffer heavy losses. But NATO has one advantage: air support. American A-10 Warthogs and F-35s hammer Russian columns with precision strikes. Russian air defenses, Panzer and Tor systems, shoot down several aircraft, but not enough. By nightfall, the Russian advance is stalled. But in the south, a second front opens. Russian forces in Crimea launch an assault toward Odessa, Ukraine. Ukraine, though not a NATO member, is a U.S. ally. American military advisors are embedded with Ukrainian forces. The war spreads. Day 3. The United States escalates. At 4:00 a.m. EST, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, flying from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, strike deep inside Russia. Their targets: the Engels Strategic Bomber Base near Saratov and the Dzerzhinsky Missile Production Facility in the Urals. The bombers drop GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators, bunker-busting bombs designed to destroy hardened targets. Both facilities are crippled. Russia retaliates. Long-range Kh-101 cruise missiles, launched from Tu-95 and Tu-160 bombers over the Caspian Sea, strike U.S. bases in Germany and Italy. Ramstein Air Base is hit. The headquarters of U.S. Air Forces Europe is damaged. 47 American personnel are killed. Aviano Air Base in Italy is struck. F-16 jets are destroyed on the tarmac. The war is no longer confined to Eastern Europe. Western Europe is now a battlefield. Day 4. In the Arctic, the submarine war intensifies. Russian Borei-class ballistic missile submarines, armed with Bulava nuclear-tipped missiles, attempt to break out into the North Atlantic. American and British submarines hunt them. A British Astute-class submarine, the HMS Audacious, engages a Russian Borei near the Juki Gap, the choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the UK. Torpedoes are exchanged. The Russian submarine is damaged but escapes. The HMS Audacious is not so lucky. A Russian Severodvinsk-class attack sub, shadowing the British boat, fires a salvo of torpedoes. The HMS Audacious sinks with all hands. It is the first British submarine lost in combat since World War II. Day 5. Europe's energy crisis explodes. Russian forces have seized control of key natural gas pipelines in Ukraine. Flows to Western Europe are cut. Germany, Austria, and Italy, dependent on Russian gas, face energy collapse. Industrial production halts. Millions of homes lose heating as November cold grips the continent. European governments impose rationing. Protests erupt in Berlin, Vienna, and Rome. Meanwhile, global grain supplies collapse. Ukraine and Russia together produce 30% of the world's wheat exports. With war raging, exports cease. Food prices spike. Hunger looms in the Middle East and Africa. The war is now causing global famine. Day 6. NATO reinforcements pour into Europe. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division lands in Poland. The 1st Armored Division arrives in Germany. The 82nd Airborne Division drops into the Baltics. But moving troops is one thing. Sustaining them is another. NATO logistics depend on rail and road networks, many of which have been destroyed by Russian missile strikes. Fuel is scarce. Ammunition is limited. The Pentagon orders emergency production increases. Defense contractors ramp up, but it will take weeks, maybe months, to replace losses. Russia faces the same problem, only worse. Sanctions have cut off access to Western technology and spare parts. Russian factories struggle to produce precision components. Aircraft are grounded for lack of parts. Tanks sit idle for lack of maintenance. Both sides are bleeding resources. Day 7. 1 week in. NATO has stopped the Russian advance in the Baltics, but barely. The Suwałki Gap remains open, barely. The war at sea is a stalemate. Both sides have lost ships. Both sides have lost submarines. The air war is a war of attrition. Both sides are running out of precision munitions. Casualties, estimated military dead, 3,000 plus. Estimated military wounded, 8,000 plus. Estimated civilian dead, 1,200 plus. The global economy is in free fall. Stock markets have lost 40% of their value. Unemployment is spiking. Supply chains are shattered, and both sides are asking the same question. How long can we sustain this? But the war is far from over. Week 2. The war enters its second week, and the pattern becomes clear. This is not World War II. There are no grand offensives, no sweeping victories. This is a grinding, attritional struggle. Russia has numerical superiority in tanks and artillery, but NATO has air superiority, at least in daylight. Russian S-400 and S-500 air defense systems make NATO airstrikes costly, but NATO's F-35s, F-22s, and B-2s are capable of penetrating Russian defenses. The result? A bloody stalemate. On land, Russian forces have seized parts of eastern Estonia and northern Latvia, but NATO counterattacks have reclaimed some territory. At sea, both sides are hunting each other's submarines with everything they have. The Norwegian Sea becomes a submarine killing ground. 2 more Russian submarines are sunk, 1 more American submarine is lost. And in the cyber domain, the war escalates to a new level. Russian hackers attack U.S. undersea communication cables, the fiber optic cables that carry 99% of intercontinental internet traffic. Several cables are cut by Russian underwater drones. Transatlantic internet traffic plummets. Financial markets, already in chaos, freeze entirely. In retaliation, U.S. Cyber Command launches attacks on Russian satellite ground stations. Russian GPS equivalents, GLONASS, degrade by 60%. Russian military communications are crippled, but the damage to the global economy is catastrophic. By the end of Week 2, global GDP has contracted by 8%. Week 3. The war spreads to the Arctic. Russia's Northern Fleet, what remains of it, attempts to seize control of the Arctic Ocean. Russian forces land on Svalbard, a Norwegian territory far above the Arctic Circle. NATO responds with fury. U.S. Marines, supported by Norwegian Special Forces, retake the islands in a brutal winter battle. But the real prize is not land, it's undersea. Beneath the Arctic ice, Russian and American submarines hunt each other in near-total darkness. The Arctic is now the most dangerous place on Earth. Meanwhile, NATO's industrial base ramps up. American factories work 24/7. Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, all are producing missiles, bombs, and ammunition at wartime rates. European factories join in, but Russia's industrial capacity is collapsing. Sanctions have cut off access to semiconductors, precision machinery, and advanced materials. Russian missile production has dropped by 60%. Aircraft production has nearly stopped. The Russian military is running out of high-tech weapons. And that makes them more dangerous, because desperate nations do desperate things. Week 4, the nuclear question resurfaces. At a meeting of the Russian Security Council, the defense minister proposes a limited nuclear strike. The target, NATO forces massed in Poland. The weapon, a single Iskander-M missile, armed with a 10-kiloton tactical nuclear warhead. The purpose, to break NATO's will. Putin listens. He does not decide, not yet, but the United States intelligence community picks up chatter. Satellite imagery shows unusual activity at Russian nuclear storage sites. The president is briefed. In response, the U.S. moves B-61 tactical nuclear bombs to forward bases in Europe. American F-35s are prepared to deliver them. The message is clear. If you use a nuke, so will we. The world holds its breath. Week 5. Economic collapse accelerates. In Russia, the ruble has lost 80% of its value. Hyperinflation grips the country. Store shelves are empty. Lines for bread stretch for blocks. Protests erupt in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Yekaterinburg. The Kremlin responds with brutal crackdowns. Thousands are arrested. But the pressure on Putin grows. In the United States, the economy is in recession. Unemployment has hit 12%. Gas prices are $8 per gallon. Inflation is 15%. Public support for the war is wavering. Protests erupt in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. "Not our war," they chant. The president faces pressure from all sides, but withdrawal is not an option, because withdrawal means NATO's collapse, and NATO's collapse means Russian dominance of Europe. The stakes are too high. Week 6. The war enters its 6th week, and the first signs of exhaustion appear. NATO has lost 47 aircraft, 12 ships, 4 submarines, approximately 6,000 military personnel. Russia has lost 89 aircraft, 19 ships, 7 submarines, approximately 14,000 military personnel. Both sides are running low on precision munitions. Both sides are running low on fuel. Both sides are running low on political will. Back channels open. Turkish diplomats, acting as intermediaries, arrange secret talks between U.S. and Russian officials. The location, Geneva, Switzerland. The goal, a ceasefire. But the terms are impossible. Russia demands NATO withdrawal from the Baltic states. The U.S. demands Russian withdrawal from all occupied territories. Neither side will budge. The talks collapse. The war continues. Month 2. By the end of the 2nd month, the war has settled into a horrific routine. Daily artillery duels along the front lines. Nightly missile strikes on cities and infrastructure. Weekly submarine engagements beneath the Arctic ice. Casualties mount, NATO dead, 11,000 plus. Russian dead, 28,000 plus. Civilian dead, 8,000 plus. Europe is in ruins. Cities in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are shattered. Tallinn, Riga, and Vilnius are bombed-out husks. Millions of refugees flood westward. Camps spring up in Poland, Germany, and France. The humanitarian crisis is unprecedented. Meanwhile, the global economy disintegrates. Trade routes are closed. Shipping is paralyzed. Supply chains are destroyed. Famine spreads in Africa and the Middle East. Food riots erupt in Egypt, Yemen, and Kenya. Governments collapse. The war, fought thousands of miles away, is killing millions through starvation. And still, neither side will yield. Month 3. In the third month, the unthinkable nearly happens. A Russian Borei-class submarine, the Knyaz Vladimir, armed with 16 Bulava ballistic missiles, each carrying multiple nuclear warheads, breaks through NATO submarine defenses and enters the North Atlantic. Its mission: to position itself within striking range of the eastern United States. American attack submarines hunt it desperately. For 6 days, the Knyaz Vladimir evades detection. Then, on the 7th day, an American Virginia-class submarine, the USS Indiana, finds it. The American captain is faced with a terrible choice. If he fires, he might sink a submarine carrying nuclear weapons, potentially triggering a nuclear explosion, or worse, a Russian nuclear retaliation. If he doesn't fire, the Russian submarine could launch its missiles at American cities. He fires. The Knyaz Vladimir is hit. It sinks, but does not explode. The nuclear warheads, designed with multiple safeguards, do not detonate. But the world was seconds away from nuclear Armageddon, and both sides know it. Month 4. 4 months in, the war is unsustainable. Russia's economy has collapsed entirely. GDP has contracted by 40%. The government is on the verge of bankruptcy. Internal pressures mount. Oligarchs, once loyal to Putin, begin to waver. Rumors of a coup circulate. In the United States, the political situation is equally dire. Midterm elections approach. The war is deeply unpopular. Congress threatens to cut off funding. The president faces impeachment calls. And on the battlefield, exhaustion reigns. NATO forces have reclaimed most of the Baltic states, but at enormous cost. Russian forces have withdrawn to defensive positions, but they have not surrendered. Both sides are bleeding, both sides are broken, and both sides are looking for a way out. Finally, under intense international pressure from China, India, and the United Nations, both sides agree to a ceasefire. The terms Russian withdrawal from the Baltic states, NATO pledge not to expand further east, demilitarized zone along the Russian-NATO border, international observers. It is not peace, it is an exhausted pause. So, if the United States and Russia went to war today, who loses? The answer is simple. Everyone. Military outcome. NATO achieved its core objective, defending the Baltic states. Russia failed to achieve its objectives. It did not fracture NATO, it did not seize the Suwałki Gap, and it did not force the West to capitulate. But NATO paid an unbearable price. Thousands of soldiers dead, dozens of ships sunk, hundreds of aircraft destroyed. And for what? To defend 60 miles of land? Russia's military was shattered, but it still exists, and its nuclear arsenal remains intact. Economic devastation. The global economy has collapsed. Stock markets lost 30 trillion in value. Supply chains disintegrated. Millions are unemployed. Tens of millions are starving. The cost of the war, estimated at $5 trillion and rising. Russia's economy will take decades to recover, if it ever does. The United States entered a deep recession. Europe faces energy poverty and political instability. China, sitting on the sidelines, emerges as the only real winner, ready to fill the power vacuum. Geopolitical aftershocks. NATO survived but barely. Internal divisions deepened. Eastern European members feel abandoned. Western European members question the value of the alliance. Russia, though weakened, is more paranoid and more dangerous than ever. Putin's grip on power is fragile. The risk of internal collapse and the chaos that would follow is real. And the world learned a terrible lesson. Modern war between nuclear powers is not winnable. It is only survivable, barely. Nuclear risk assessment. The world came within seconds of nuclear war at least 3 times during the conflict. The fact that nuclear weapons were not used was not due to restraint. It was due to luck. And luck runs out. Lessons for future conflict prevention. The institutions designed to prevent great power war, the United Nations, diplomatic channels, arms control treaties, failed. They failed because both sides believed they could win. They were both wrong. The only real victory in a conflict of this scale is avoiding it entirely. Deterrence works, but only if both sides believe the cost is too high. The moment one side miscalculates, the moment one leader believes a quick victory is possible, the entire system collapses, and the cost is measured in cities destroyed, economies shattered, and lives lost. Why no side can claim real victory? Let's be clear about the math. Russia lost 28,000 plus military personnel, 89 aircraft, 19 ships, 7 submarines, 40% of its GDP, its status as a global superpower, any hope of economic recovery for a generation. The United States lost 11,000 plus military personnel, 47 aircraft, 12 ships, 4 submarines, $5 trillion in direct and indirect costs, public support for foreign intervention, its image as an invincible military power. NATO lost the trust of millions of Europeans who wonder if the alliance is worth dying for. The certainty that Article 5 guarantees security, decades of peace and prosperity. Europe lost 8,000 plus civilians, 3 Baltic capitals reduced to rubble, energy independence, economic stability. The world lost 30 trillion in economic value, millions displaced, tens of millions facing starvation. The illusion that great power war was impossible. And the worst part? The underlying issues remain unresolved. NATO still exists on Russia's border. Russia still views NATO as an existential threat. The seeds of the next war have already been planted. So let's return to the question. If the US and Russia go to war today, who loses? Russia loses its military, its economy, and possibly its government. The United States loses thousands of soldiers, trillions of dollars, and its global dominance. Europe loses its security, its prosperity, and its future. The world loses stability, food security, and any hope of cooperation on global challenges like climate change and pandemics. But there is one more answer. We all lose. Because in a war between nuclear powers, victory is a lie. There are no winners. There are only survivors. And even they inherit a world that is darker, poorer, and more dangerous than the one that existed before the first shot was fired. The only way to win is not to play. This scenario is not a prediction. It is a warning, because the weapons exist, the doctrines exist, the tension exists. All that's missing is the spark. And history has shown us, again and again, the spark always comes, unless we choose differently.